Hey, everybody. Welcome to another live stream episode of Talking Timepieces, where we talk about watch collecting and horology. Um, Pardon the poor video quality today. I'm running the laptop camera because my web camera, the plug got damaged, and so the camera is useless because the plug does not work. I'll have to take it to a local shop and see if they'll put a fresh plug on the end. But I've also ordered another camera because I didn't realize that I've gotten to the point where I would actually need a backup streaming camera, but there we are. I have a backup video camera for my journalism work, but I guess the laptop camera is a backup camera, but I don't like the video quality, but at least we still have the sound. Hey, Mark Leov, how's it going? Or Elkov? How's it going? Glad to see you here. Glad to see the people starting to come in. One of the nice things about this channel is I've always been an advocate that this should be a forum for people to talk about watches. So the floor is open to questions, but I'm going to start by talking about watch features. And by a watch feature, I'm talking about something that is not part of the watch's movement or complication set. In other words, things that are part of the watch, but not directly part of how it tells time. Hans Lehr, greetings. Wristwatch check. You're wearing your vintage 1926 automatic, very nice. Wristwatch check, I'm wearing my, Maurice Lacroix Icon, GMT. I like it, it's a nice piece, although it does have its flaws. It'll be the next, piece that I'll be doing a review on, and, I'll give it a A minus as far as watches go. I gotta think of a good, headline. I don't like clickbait headlines, but I like headlines that at least, attract the interest of the audience. Um, but yeah, when I was saying about date feature is good. Hey, UK Carl. Yeah, for example, having the date on a watch is a nice feature. You know, Mark, wristwatch check, Seagull 19. Hey, the 1963 classic piece. I got a video on that one in my archive, in fact. Um, because when you think about it, part of it was when I saw a video recently, and someone was reviewing a watch. I have to wet my whistle. Drinking Augustiner lager beer Helles today. Mm. And Neil Bailey, hi all. How you doing, Neil? And but yeah, I was watching a review of a watch, and the person who was reviewing it, I'm not going to name names because it happens a lot, and it's not endemic to just one channel or one person. I hear it happening often, and I very curious what you think. But I was hearing someone talking about a watch, and it had 100 meters of water resistance, and it did not have a screw down crown, and they dinged it for that. And I was thinking, well, modern watchmaking, 10 bar with a non screw down crown is pretty normal. And when you think about the aspect that the person who is criticizing it will probably never get it wet more aggressively than taking a shower with it or washing their hands with it or maybe splashing around in a pool. To complain about a watch not having a screw down crown that's 100 meters rated, it goes back to what I was saying last week about, are we watch collectors to collect watches, or are we watch collectors to hem and haw and whinge and whine about what the watches have? For example, this Jaeger-LeCoultre Polaris, right? High horology, very well made piece, 100,000 hour master control movement, 100 meters of water resistance, no screw down crown, right? Longines GMT, not a diver, screw down crown. Now, of course, divers you expect to have screw down crowns, right? But is it important that a Flieger have a screw down crown? right? I mean, a Flieger's not even supposed to be in the water, right? But people will ding, for example, that Longines. If it didn't have a screw down crown, people probably would have complained about that aspect. But they put a screw down crown on it with a big grippy crown to, um, you know, touch all the bases, as it were, because it is a nice aviator design, very well done with a nice onion type crown, right? Big grippy crown, and it's screw down. Now, this also points out another feature that you could debate, and that's whether to have a rotating GMT. Well, a GMT, you'd need it on the watch, but for example, the Seamaster GMT has a timing bezel. Okay, so this has a GMT bezel, but this has a straight up diving timing bezel, even though it is also a GMT. Now, that means you can't do third time zone and calculations with it because it doesn't have a GMT bezel. Uh, and this does, but, uh, if this is a true diver, you would want a timing bezel, and frankly, in a day-to-day, act, I like a timing bezel. Sometimes I'm wearing this and I stick something in the oven, and then I go, "Oh, darn it, it's a GMT bezel." But then when I'm traveling, I like the GMT bezel. So, the features are also highly dependent on what you got the watch for and, why you're wearing it at the time, right? Uh, Oars, "Hey, how's it going, Oars?" When you think about those things, so like you start with things like screw down bezels and screw down crowns and timing bezels, or even, for example, a tachometer track, right? Um, a lot of chronographs have a tachometer track on the outside bezel for mileage and speed calculations. Well, actually, tachometer can be used on any marked distance. It could be a marked inch, as long as you use it properly. This will tell you how many inches per hour it's going or whatever. Um, but this one, for example, is a chrono, and it has a diver's timing bezel, the Captain Cook, right? So. Um, the functionality of a watch is linked to the bezel, but it's not, restricted by the bezel. In the case, for example, of the, Breitling Navitimer, the bezel's a slide rule, and, I mean, heck, I like to think of myself as a geek, and I can only do multiplication on this thing. The average person doesn't even know how to use a slide rule. Uh, oh, the average person under the age of 30 probably doesn't even know what a slide rule looks like. So, features in a watch, some of them harken back to legacy, and some of them harken back to, old school functionality. Like, for example, the Speedmaster, I left it in the case, but the Speedmaster, if you think about it, right, it has a tachometer bezel, but it's lauded as a space watch, and a tachometer bezel is not needed in a space watch, but it harkens back to the Speedmaster's original roots as a racing watch. So, features can be used to also establish the heritage of a piece. Like I said, very few people use a tachometer bezel, and almost nobody uses. Well, professionals do. I still know some pilots who use the Navitimer bezel, but f a lot of features are there just to please the user and show the watch's, intended application space, but do not necessarily impact the watch directly. And then there are, things like, the Cyclops, right? The Cyclops is a feature, but it's also a design cue for the watch, right? Or things like, as Mark says, loom and strap options. Think about how many companies have watch straps that are like the Rolex has got the Datejust has got the single link swing out adjustment. Some watches, the new Longines has an interesting adjustment on the buckle, micro adjustment on a leather strap. The Mont Blanc Geosphere and some of the other Mont Blancs have got those, and the Zenith El Primero, my Zenith El Primero Chronomaster also has a leather strap with micro adjustment, so it's possible to do. But then again, you get a watch, for example, like the Rattle Captain Cook, which came with leather and NATO straps because it has a quick release system, or actually it's designed to work around quick release, double-ended spring bars. Um, this watch does not have any micro adjustment at all, and, I mean, it doesn't even have a diving, deployment for a diver's watch, but then again, I think they realized that's not something that's that important in a modern dive watch, but, if they didn't have half links with this system, this would be very difficult to fit, and that goes with a lot of watches. I mean, if you think about it, there are quite a few pieces that, you have a double deployant buckle, and there's not really a way to adjust it. So you have to put in half links or full links, and then the bracelet's either slightly loose or slightly tight. I mean, even a cheap watches, a lot of these cheap ones have micro adjustment holes to at least move the strap back and forth. So one could almost make the argument that some of the cheaper straps are more comfortable than some of the more expensive straps because the cheaper straps can be adjusted more easily and more finely, you know? Um, and then, of course, there's loom. Loom is something that I talk about a lot because I think on a suit watch, on something that you're going to wear and be elegant with. Oh, I was gonna pull my lawn jeans, but I don't have it handy. The it's in the case still. Um, but, a suit watch, one that's not intended to be, worn round the clock, I don't think loom is important, but if it's pitched as a daily wear watch that you can wear everywhere, yeah, I expect it to be fully loomed, or at least token loom like you see in a JLC. I mean, they managed to put loom in a $20,000 watch. Um, Grand Seiko could do it too. I mean, it's not like they don't loom their watches, but they don't loom their sports luxuries, for example. Or well, there are some other companies that don't, and some of them do it because it's classic. They want to have a heat blued hand or something along those lines. But then those are mostly, like I said, suit watches, day wear watches. But how important is loom to you? How important are timing bezels to you? Screw down crowns. Tell us all what you think about it all. I mean, and as I was saying, a lot of these features help define the watch's identity. You know what I mean? Like the slide rule defines the Navitimer, for example, or how a GMT bezel defines a GMT. But then some features can be a little whimsical, like the compass in the Sin compass. It's a GMT watch, non-rotating bezel, but it's a GMT. It's a travel GMT. The GMT hour, the GMT. I mean, it's a office GMT. The GMT hand is the flying hand, not the local hour hand. But then one could argue that that's a feature, whether the GMT is a travel GMT or an office GMT. How does that play out? What's more important to you? So the features can accentuate and highlight and underscore and enhance the functionality of a watch. Um, like in the case of this glycine GMT, I just did the piece on that. It's in the archive. This has got a city wheel that you can control. It's an internal city wheel that you can control with an external knob. Um, a city wheel can take any watch and turn it into a world timer as long as you're willing to spin that dial and do the calculations on. That's the easiest way to get a world timer is to just throw a city ring on the bezel, um, and that helps define a watch as well. Whether or not it's got a city ring as a bezel or as timing bezel or a GMT bezel. Um, I mean, a watch with, say, for example, that's a true city, though that city ring in a true world timer is not a feature, it's a complication because it moves. Whereas a city ring that you set yourself is a feature, not a complication in the watch. Um, the timing bezel can also be internal. The timing bezel in this JLC is internal. They call this a compressor design. The first compressor design is actually compressed with water pressure, like the Vostok Amphibia. But today, compressor design mostly refers to watches that have uh, top and bottom put crowns at the 2 and the 4. And depending on what kind of compressor it is, the top one might adjust an alarm, like in the Memovox, or it might adjust a bezel, like, in just one of their regular divers, or it could adjust a city wheel. It could adjust all kinds of interesting things, moon phase calculation. There are a lot of ways you can add functionality to a watch by just using features as opposed to actually changing the functionality of the watch. In fact, that's another one I've used it a lot in videos, but I don't think it has its own video. That one from the '70s I have that has just a lot of functions, but they're all tied to how interestingly laid out and designed the bezel markings are. Let's see. Let's look at the comments. Neil, I'd like to know more about tools and are available. Well, I've got an episode on tools, but if you have any questions about tools, I'd be more than happy to answer them now. But we do have an episode in the archive on tools and accessories that you could take a look at. And if you have any questions about that, we could do a follow up tools and accessories episode and address any of your follow on questions, and not just Neil's, any of you who want to take a look at that accessories and tools video and have any suggestions on how I can flesh it out and expand it, we'll do a part two. Oh, pardon me. I didn't keep realizing I'm right next to the mic as I'm clearing my throat. Evening, Ors. How you doing? Let's see. I think I already said hi to Ors, but it never hurts to say hi twice if I missed somebody like Neil and Hannes. So it really depends. Am I working on the okay, no, Hannes is he's got a deep one here. It really depends. Am I working on the airport? The timing bezel will be useful working at the airport. It's very important to time arrival and departure of flights. But if I'm in the office, I like wearing my Seiko 5 with day date function. See, there you go. So, well, as I was saying, it ties to application, right? So if you are, using it to time your cooking, then you're going to want a timing bezel. Whereas if you are flying or on a flight, you want that GMT bezel, or maybe you want some other bezel, world timer. But yeah, it depends on where you are and what you're doing at the time. But then again, that's the nice thing about having a collection. You can have a watch that is tailored for whatever application, clothing, occasion, situation in the list from a posh event. Oh, which reminds me, I'll be at the Matter launch next week in Amsterdam. Matter is going to be the new lingua franca for Internet of Things at the consumer level. It'll be an interesting thing. But yeah, so you were a nice watching an event like that. But then when you go out into the town in the evening, I don't want to bop around downtown Amsterdam with a Rolex. So I'm going to wear my Universal Genève Senna as my, knocking around but interesting to talk about watch. And then the next day I might wear something else. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm going to wear on day 2. I'm going to wear either the Omega or my JLC. But the thing about it is having a variety. That's one of the arguments for having a watch collection and a variety of watches. And that, like I said, it doesn't have anything to do with the price. You can have a Seiko GMT for 500 and an Orient Bambino dress watch and a G-Shock, as your beater, and then you got a 3-watch collection that costs less than $1,000. It's not, collecting's not about the money. And same thing with accessories. There are some very expensive watches that have a lot of bells and whistles and frippery about them. But then there are some inexpensive watches that also have very nice accessories like timing bezels or screw down crowns or micro adjustable bracelets, loomed faces. What do you consider an interesting or important accessory on a watch? Hey, Jason Hopeful. Hello, all. Shy Robert. Hi, Shy. Loom's not forever. Some people don't like the vintage look of old loom. Well, that's one of the things, Shy, that I will give to people who don't like loom on watches, is that loom does age and it does show its use over time, as it were. Um, so I can respect someone and I can understand them. Well, you don't need my respect or my approval, but I mean, I can understand people who have uh, a desire for a watch that does not have loom because they want that watch to stay as pristine as possible over time. But I think that a lot of those are good suit watches, like a nice enamel dial with heat blued hands. That face will stay looking that beautiful forever. But then again, there's nothing wrong, with having. Which if you consider, for example, like a Seiko Snowflake, and want to wear it around the clock, and just figure in the dark, it's gonna be dark. It's still a great watch. I'm not gonna say it's not. And then the advantage there, which is probably why they didn't loom those, is Seiko was thinking for the long run. They didn't want those watches to show, that kind of aging. But then again, modern loom materials, don't age in the same way. Superluminova, um, I mean, they antique it a lot, but I'm very curious to see how Superluminova would look after 50 years. Um, but at the minimum, when you think of some of these new indices and hands that have blocks of like luminescent plastic in them, as it were, those might age, but at least they probably won't crumble like the old loom used to do and crumble out of the indices and crumble out of the hands and create a danger for the movement. Um, I think a modern watch is more applicable for loom because modern loom is more reliable. But then again, like I said, I can understand people who don't want loom on their watch. They don't want the risk of patina or aging because they like the pristine look of the watch. And me personally, I like a new watch over an older watch looks wise. But then I have watches in my collection that have patina that I like my Speedmaster. But it has a very gentle patina, which I like. It's the indices have a very muted yellowish hue to them, um, but, they're not, in bad shape or crumbling, and the face isn't going through any deterioration. So, patina's a thing, yeah, take or leave. I personally don't like aggressive patina, but I could take a little bit of it. I'm not a big fan of a lot of these watches that are trying to, faux age and faux patina their watches. Unless it matches the color scheme of the watch. Like, I'll let Omega get away with that, James Bond no date Seamaster because it was faux aged loom, but it matched the brown and yellow color scheme of the watch. So you could almost say that they colored the loom yellow to match the color scheme. But like I said, I can completely understand someone who doesn't want loom on their watch because then if you don't want that aging, you don't want that aging, and that's your choice as well. Um, I've got a couple of pieces with no loom, but they're mostly dress pieces, suit watches, daytime wear, so I'm not that worried about those. Let's see. Mark, you wanted to do mods. Oh, okay. So you would be talking about heavier tools than I talked about in that episode anyway, because in the episode where I talked about tools the average watch user would need: pin tools, maybe a back tool if you wanted to check on the movement, like, for example, I wouldn't touch a Rolex movement, but I open up a Rolex to make sure that it's authentic if I was buying it or advising someone on buying it, because, with a really good fake, the only way you can really know is by looking at the escapement to see if it's a free sprung balance or not. And if it's a free sprung balance, then that's a really high-end clone, and you're not gonna you'd have to take it to a jeweler to have them verify it. But I mean, to have just basic tools to check on a watch, change batteries, change straps, adjust things, remove links from the bracelet, whether it's a pin bracelet, pin and sleeve, or a screw bracelet. To have those kind of tools, everyone should have those kind of tools. To mod, a good screwdriver set and a good standard watch set will work with your basic mods like swapping cases, swapping faces and hands and things. Then you're going beyond tools and into expertise and practice. You are going to need different tools to take off the hands. You're also going to need processes. You're going to need to make sure you've got a divider cup to put all the little pieces in, and you're going to have to make sure you've got little pieces of plastic to put on the hands. So when you pry the hands off, you're not scratching the face or the hands. Um, when you start talking about modding, how deep down that rabbit hole do you want to go? Do you just want to change cases? If you want to change cases and faces and hands, um, yeah, I think I could do an episode on that kind of thing and tell you the kind of tools you're going to need. But the other side of that coin is buy a couple of cheap watches and practice on them because you definitely don't want to do that to a nice piece and make a small mistake. Make your mistakes on the pieces you can afford to mess up. But tools are half the job, but knowing what you're doing is the other half. If you have the tools and you don't know what you're doing, you do a job, half-assed job. I get to say half-assed on YouTube. And if you know what you're doing and you don't have the tools, you do a half-assed job. But if you know what you're doing and you have the right tools, you can do a great job. And so, modding can be really fun. I really like seeing some of the Seiko mods I'm seeing on Instagram, for example. Not a big fan of the GMT master mods that have a 12-hour watch movement in them. Now that Seiko makes a good, reasonably priced GMT, I think we're gonna see a lot more good Seiko GMT mods because now they have a movement that has that important GMT hand, so that the bezel doesn't look like a joke on a three-hander. You need a four-hander for a GMT, and now that Seiko's got one, I'm looking forward to seeing some cool mods on that side. So, yeah, modding is really fun. Me personally, I'm not a modder because I I would just add another layer of complexity to my life right now. It's bad enough that I'm addicted to collecting. Um, and also, you need to set up a good work area, and that's the one thing I don't have in this. My old place had a work area, and that's one thing I do regret about having a big empty room that I didn't need. I'm glad that I gave it up, but it was nice to have the luxury of a huge room that I could just do whatever the heck I wanted and put stuff on the table. But yeah, if you want to mod, get the right tools. Like I said, I'll look at the episode I did, and I'll do another episode and talk about specifically about modding. That's actually a good topic for the next live stream, is talk about modding, and I'll talk about tools for that in that episode. Um, but yeah, you also have to know what you're doing and practice, because even if you know what you're doing, that's delicate work. That's really delicate work. So you're gonna need a loop. And you can't just squinch it up in your eye, like when you're just looking at a watch. Because if you're looking at a watch and the loop falls out, you can put it back in your eye, nothing's wrong. But if you're adjusting something and the loop falls out, and heaven forbid land on what you're looking at, you could do something damaging to your watch. If only the loss of rhythm while you're working on it that you're adjusting the loop. So maybe a set of third hands. But they've got little pincers and a magnifying glass so you can hold something and examine it while you work on it. But yeah. Watch tools go beyond just the tools that you work on the watch with. They go in. You have to have a workspace, and it has to be set up properly with the tools and the things like I said, partition cups and stuff like that. Where a place to hold the little putty to remove dust from the face of the watch. You need a place for everything, and everything has to have a place, and all the tools have to have a place, and the stuff you're using has to have a place. So, half of doing it is knowing what you're doing, and the other half is the tools. And I guess the encompassing circle for the Venn diagram would be the workspace. But yeah, we can do it. We'll do an episode on modding. Next live stream, we'll do it. So let's see. Nothing up on the live stream. I mean, well, let's see. Oh no, here we go. Mark says, "Thanks for the advice. Been taking apart old watches, trying to practice and learn." Well, that's a great way. That's a great way to do it. And if you go to a lot of antique shops, some of the really old ones, some of them have like boxes of discarded movements, because they'll take the gold case off of a watch and they'll throw the movement away if it's an uninteresting brand or a small size, an unpopular size, and you can take those movements and play with them and practice on them. I've practiced regulating, moving the bar back and forth to adjust the spring length on a watch, on like a Vostok and some other inexpensive pieces. But yeah, I could see myself doing that as well. But that's another area of the collecting space that I may wind up going into eventually because I can see myself easily getting into that as I have less pressing, day-to-day business stuff to do and more time on my hands. I mean, I really do intend to retire in 5, and, I can see myself doing more of that hands-on detail work, hobby stuff that I used to do, you know? If you built models as a kid, uh, and did, handiworks as an adult, woodworking or engine repair or any of those things, I could easily see, watch repair or modding as a really, really beautiful way to expand your watch hobby, you know? Um, so yeah, Godspeed and, good luck, and like I said, next week, I'll do it and I'll even do a little bit extra of, research because I was talking about some of the newer mods out there, and we'll have a nice chat about mods next week. So, what else are we going on? Well, actually, when we talk about accessories, we can go back to the accessory pile and talk about, some of the aspects of accessories because it really does matter. It really does matter to the presentation of the piece and how it's perceived because um, watch, functionality is very strongly tied to how we perceive it, right? If it's a diver's watch, it better look like a diver's watch. If it's a pilot's watch, it better look like a pilot's watch, and if it has fun functionality, like a slide rule bezel, or even one could almost make the argument that a chronograph function or some of the complications that don't directly relate to telling time could also be considered features. But since they are part of the movement and part of the watch set, I would not go as far as to say they're features. They're just more interesting complications, but they all tie together to present the watch itself, Hannes, a pocket watch is a good start if you like to learn to disassemble a watch and get into it seriously. Actually, that's an excellent point. Pocket watches are inexpensive, large, and a lot of the vintage ones are very simply and cleanly laid out, so you get to see and understand the functionality very well. Um, I've got about 4 pocket watches in my collection currently, and yeah, actually, that's not a bad idea to take, 1 or 2 of the although I don't currently have any beat up ones. I should add a couple just for the, playing around aspect. Although I do have a few, loose movements just floating around that I picked up to make pins out of, and I made some pins, and then I had some extras, and I got them just, like, lying in my glass cabinet. Um, but yeah, pocket watches, that's a great idea to use them as practice pieces for, and even modding, you know? And you could mod your, pocket watch and turn it into something, really cool, You practice on your modding skills and make something, interesting, and then, turn around and do it on one of your, watches that you like slightly more. Work your way up the ladder. Yeah, see, it's always nice to see, Mark and Hannes are having a little bit of a chat there, but about, things, and actually, it does make a lot of sense, but the beautiful part about watch collecting and working on that aspect of it is there are a lot of vintage old used pieces that sadly were discarded by society and time. Take them and turn them into something that you would enjoy using. You know what I mean? When you think about it, right? The whole aspect of there is literally a sea of old watches out there that you could play with. There are people who turn them into artwork. There are people who put them together into well, I guess a sculpture is artwork. I was more thinking two-dimensional artwork, and then you can make sculptures that's three-dimensional artwork, or you can practice on them with your watchmaking and your modding skills. That's all the cool stuff about that, right? Um, Hannes, what are my thoughts on a moon phase as a tool? It's a nice decorative feature, but nothing more, unless you're a werewolf. That's true. You have the moon phase, and you go, getting close. But me personally, I think a moon phase is a beautiful and elegant, complication because it is tied to the, movement of the watch. It's driven by the movement, so it's more than just a feature, it's a complication of the piece, um, and it does tell time, right? It's an 28, 29-day cycle. Some moon phases are better than others. The Meister Singer moon phase, for example, is like it's a separate module they put on top of it, so it's more accurate than the moon phase. The moon phase you get in the standard watch, like a Value 7751, right? Like what's in my Longines moon phase calendar. That's going to be off by about half a day a year, which is not a lot. And with the moon phase, you're not going to tell because, especially when you think about you set the moon phase by comparing it to the image that they give you on the little web thing where it tells you what the moon phase is, or maybe you look at the moon that night and set it based on the moon phase, but you're still eyeballing it, right? There's not a pointer and a line. So at best, a moon phase is going to be accurate to within the day anyway. But I think it's a beautiful, I think it's an elegant, um, it is functional because it does tell you what the actual moon phase is. And maybe you're a backyard astronomer, or maybe you just like the moon, and knowing where it is and what it's doing all the time is a fun, complication, and it's elegant. A lot of watches will make the moon in gold, or at least they'll paint a smiley face on it or something, so a moon phase can be a beautiful and a whimsical function as well. So, no, I think moon phases are pardon me. I think I think moon phases are cool as heck. Oh, Shy Robert points out moon phase can correlate with the menstrual period for birth control and such. Well, not being a woman, I don't know how accurately they need to do that. I do know that the reason that there is a pill for every day is for rhythm. I mean, not all the pills have the stuff in them. Only some of them do, but it's a daily pill, so you get into a rhythm and take and then at the right point in the cycle, you take those pills. I mean, you could theoretically only take the pills during that time of the cycle, but that'd be really playing Russian roulette with your uterus, I would guess. Like I said, I'm a guy. I'm not going to begin to guess what women want or can do. Just realizing maybe it's grainy because I didn't have the lens cover completely on, but no, it's just a bad. I didn't realize how low quality the camera in this laptop was. I got so used to the nice Logitech streaming cam, but I do have another camera on order, and I'm going to have the one that broke fixed, so I'll have two cameras. So I'll have one for backup. But um, I would say that moon phase on a watch is more decorative than functional, but there are almost certainly applications you can think of that could use it. Hannes, agree on your thoughts. Says at Shy, never thought about that. But my girlfriend agrees. Oh, hey, okay. So Hannes's girlfriend agrees. At least we have support from one of the female gender in this conversation. I always loathe to talk about anything without those involved in the conversation, because not knowing how lady parts work, I'm not sure how useful the moon phase is. But if Hannes's girlfriend thinks it's not a bad idea, maybe there is some function to that. But hey, we're a little bit past the halfway mark. If anybody has any topics that they wanted to talk about, obviously we can get into it. But otherwise, we can continue on the subject of functionality, because, like, when you think about some functionality is pretty. Um, I wouldn't say gratuitous completely. There were probably, maybe 10% of the people who bought this watch actually used the compass, but I would argue that the same number of people who use the compass feature on this watch is the same percentage of people who took this watch 200 meters underwater, you know? And which takes us back full circle. If it's a watch that's rated for the right depth, who am I to armchair quarterback how the manufacturer achieves it, right? So if it's 100 meters water resistant and it's not a screw down crown, is it a bad watch? I've heard watch pundits ding watches that are 100-meter water rated and don't have a screw down crown, as if it makes it a bad watch that it doesn't have a screw down crown. But then again, 100 meters of water resistance with modern machining and gasketing technology is not hard to do. Watch with a screw down crown today, I would expect to be at least 200 meters water resistant because, if you're gonna go that length, a screw down crown is in a modern watch is, almost I won't say it's exactly on the level of belt and suspenders because a screw down crown is useful. It reaffirms to the user that the watch is sealed. If you have a screw down crown, that it's at least it's splash proof, right? The gasket might be gone in a screw down crown, but it's harder for the water to enter it. And if you're just an armchair quarterback and desktop surfer, you're not going to challenge even if it's a degraded water resistance if there's a screw down crown. So I can see where a lot of people are comforted by a screw down crown, but a screw down crown does not determine the water resistance level of a piece. How the stem and gasket are constructed, the gasketing around it are constructed, are how that is established. And also, for a lot of watches, the sealing mechanism is actually a part of the stem and crown pullout and pushback. So some features are important, some features are useful, and some features are just desired. Like I was saying, when you think about a tachometer scale on a chrono, right? How many of us drive a marked kilometer or a marked mile or observe things that do, and yet it's considered de rigueur to have a tachometer scale on a sports chronograph. But why? There are a lot of sports chronographs that do not have tack scales, and I commend them. But a lot of chronographs have tack scales. Is it that important to have a tack scale on a chronograph? When I think of, say, for example, there it is. Oh, there it's not. Yeah, the Ratto Captain Cook, right? It's got a diving bezel, but no tack bezel because it's not intended for racing. But then again, a pilot's chrono isn't intended for racing, but a lot of them have tack bezels. I think they're trying to chase what they think that the buyer wants, but then what do you want? Let's see. Mark, what about those oil watches? You put oil in it, it apparently makes the water resistance unlimited. Is this true? No, not really. It increases the water resistance, yes. But the primary benefit of the oil, or for example, if you look at a diving watch that's seriously doing it, like the Sin U2, right? I'm not talking about some of these oil mods where they're putting oil in. I'm talking about a watch that was made with oil in it, designed to run oil filled. um, they nod in the direction of the oil resistance, but if to the sin, they present the oil more because it has an optical gradient the same as the glass, so it looks like it doesn't have a face. It doesn't have a crystal, right? So since the oil is the same optical, permissivity or whatever, the light passes through the oil the same as it does the glass. It does not appear to have crystal, and it's more legible, which is important in a diving watch. So the primary benefit of an oil-filled watch is actually legibility. Resonance Resonance they're a very high-end watch company, and they use oil for that purpose, specifically for visibility, to make it a really fun-looking watch. It pops. It looks like the indices and the hands are painted on the face, but they move. You can't see the crystal because it's oil filled. You don't see where the crystal ends and the air gap between the crystal and the face begins. So those kinds of pieces are really nice. When you think about it in the sense of an oil filled piece can give you a really dramatic presentation. So an oil filled watch will have a higher water resistance, more because there's less ability for the case to flex because there's no air inside or the crystal to flex. But the primary advantage of an oil-filled watch is visibility. Let's see. Jonathan Robinson, how's it going? Hi, if I didn't say hi yet. Um, I have some Certina watches that have 100 meters water resistance by way of dual stem gaskets. Well, that's exactly it. A lot of the watches that don't have a screw down crown have multiple gasketing around the stems, and they felt obviously, that it was more important to have good stem function because the thing about a screw down crown is there's got to be play in the stem, right? Because when you reach the end of the unscrewing, there has to be, even if it's only a half a millimeter or a quarter, I mean, there has to be a physical release, as it were, from the end of the screw on portion, the threaded portion of the crown retention mechanism, if you want to call it that. Um, a crown that does not screw in, by definition, can have less play because there's no need to have it disengage from an unscrewing mechanism. So, yeah, and Certina is a good company. They make good pieces, and so they made the decision go with a non screw down crown because they wanted a certain stem performance with the crown. And like I said, for 100 meters of water resistance with modern materials and tolerances, you don't need a screw down crown. But it is comforting to those who want it. But I don't think I do. And that's, like I said, that's where I started this whole session episode. Um, I think that, people who turn their noses up at a watch that doesn't have a screw down crown, I think they're missing the point. I As I said before, are we watch collectors so that we can enjoy watches and explore what these pieces can do for us and with us? Or are we around to, argue about how many watchmakers can dance on the head of a crown and if a watch is collectible enough or valuable enough, or if a watch is good enough because it meets the criteria of that pundit. Because a lot of pundits, frankly, are just throwing stuff out there because they want a reaction. I mean, how many YouTube videos start with "Is now the time to buy a Rolex"? Yeah, maybe. And I talked about it as well, but if like every other episode is let's bash things that aren't Rolex or bash Rolex for being Rolex, is that why we're collecting watches? You know? Um, Not why I'm collecting. I'm collecting so I can enjoy nice pieces. And, this debate on what features are important to you, I think it's an important debate, but it's all about our own individual tastes and how we apply them to our own watch collecting. So I'm not going to say that those people are wrong to not like a screw down crown. I'm just saying that they shouldn't beat up a watch for not having a screw down crown if it can meet its rated water resistance. That's all. I think we split hairs too many times in this hobby, and we don't have to. We can be more open and understanding and compassionate about what all of these. I mean, because actually, if you think about it, a lot of these companies are going through a lot of effort to make sure that they can make the best watch that they can at the price point that they're selling it to you. You know, that's an important thing as well. It really is because um, everyone talks about the trade-offs and the price trade-offs when a company makes a watch, right? But then again, when you think about it, they have to make those trade-offs. You can't make a watch that has every feature. If you do, it is, it's a $1 million watch. And the problem with it is, it's been pointed out before, a watch, there's about a 10-time markup from the cost of the watch to the price of the watch. So if you're buying, say, for example, a $4,000 watch, a $4,000 watch, rule of thumb, cost about 400 bucks to make, you know? And so when you're getting to the point where do I spend $5 on that watch to put it to change the crown from a regular push pull crown to a screw down crown, you have to think about it. What are the trade-offs? Is it worth adding $500 to the price of that watch at the far end? Because that's how you think about it, right? If you tack on $5 of cost, $10 of cost, $2 of cost, that $2 of cost is $200 at the retail side. So that dot of paint or the indices, how they're aligned, every little thing all adds up to cost. And so the best companies are the ones that can make nice pieces within those restrictions that we enjoy. So it is a hard battle these companies are going through, and I'm just reminding us all to remember that when we're criticizing these pieces and criticizing the companies that make them for the efforts that they're putting into these watches to make them as good as they can at the price points that they can sell to us. Now, some companies are peeing on our legs and telling it's rain. There's no way on God's green earth I could believe that some of these multi-million dollar watches cost several $100,000 to make. But then again, I'm not the person spending millions of dollars for a watch. I'm in the scrum with all of you. We're all trying to get the nicest piece we can on a middle class and salary, and if we're lucky, we get one that we like and other people like, and adds to our lifestyle. I do really like this Ratto. I'm looking forward to doing the review on it. I just picked it up, the new Ratto Captain Cook Chrono. I really do like this piece. And one of the funny, interesting things about it is the running. This does not have the same movement that a lot of the other Rattos and Mitos have. It has a different movement, and the running seconds are on the right hand register, which is unusual. Normally, you see running seconds on the left. So I'm going to look more into the movement. So when I do the review, I'll be able to explain it all to you why the running seconds are on the right on the Captain Cook and not on the left. It is interesting. Well, first off, it tells you they're not using the same base movement that a lot of companies are. So I'm gonna have fun doing the Ratto review because there are a lot of interesting things about it I want to discover for us all and talk about in the review. So let's see. Yes, Jason points out as well, the Certina has a DS system double security. Shy Robert says, screw down crown can decrease water resistance for a forgetful person like myself. Pushing crown makes it more obvious unless pushed in, the watch is not running. Yeah, well, yes. But then again, there are people who have a screw down crown and don't realize they need to screw it down. Um, there are a couple of stories out there of people who have had a watch, and the person who had that watch didn't realize that the watch was a screw down. In fact, the Vostok Amphibia is designed to be able to not be damaged if the crown is not screwed down and there's an impact on the crown. The stem is not attached to the mechanism when the crown is disengaged. So you can forget to screw down the crown on a Vostok, and if you impact the crown, it won't damage the movement. So they even figure that a lot of people won't remember to screw down the crown. So um, in a push down crown, you're guaranteed of your rated water resistance when you just push the crown down. In a screw down crown, you have to remember to screw the crown down. Good point. But then again, that's part of learning how to drive a watch, as it were. You know, don't change the date on a watch between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Not every watch is sensitive to it, but there are enough watches that are sensitive to it that you should make it a rule of thumb anyway. There are a lot of things you can do to remind yourself about watch management, and some of them relate, involve the features like bracelet features for adjustment, for example. And some of them involve direct comfort. Some people do like loom, and some people don't like loom. Some people do like rotating bezels. Some people don't like rotating bezels. That's why all of these watches all have all kinds of different features. But the features do add up to make the sum of the watch, right? And so it's how those features are put together that spell out that watch to us. I mean, because if you think about it, right, there are three hands, a face, a case, a crystal, a bezel. But changing any one of those features can make a big difference in the watch and how it works and how it performs and how it's perceived by you. Hannes, tools and features are very nice and useful depending on the personal taste, but sometimes looking on a plain 12369 dial is very pleasing and still elegant, and it only tells you the time. That's an excellent point. Let me think of well, the only three-hander I have with no frills, because the JLC is a three-hander, but it has an internal bezel, rotating bezel, um, is my, Datejust. It's just a three-hander. I used to have an Oyster Perpetual that didn't even have a date, but, the Cyclops is a feature, the little magnifying lens, because it doesn't necessarily need that, it's a convenience, and it also is a style cue that establishes the look of the piece, but then that's also something, right? The feature can also be a primary style cue for the watch, like the slide rule bezel on the Navitimer, you know? But yeah, those are my thoughts on, watch features and how they impact watches, and, um, how tied up we are in them, and some for very good reasons and some for not so very good reasons. If you think about it, right, the helium escape, this, the crowned helium escape valve on a Seamaster is a feature, but it's also directly related to the functionality of the piece and the fact that you can do saturation diving with it. Again, that's a feature that I strongly doubt anybody who's bought the watch. Um, Maybe a couple of people, but most professional divers use dive computers nowadays. But having those features on the watch reminds you that the watch has that functionality, and it speaks to the legacy and the quality of the piece. It's just like buying a Ferrari. You're not going to necessarily drive 150 miles an hour on the highway to work every day, but knowing that that car has that level of performance in it and that you may occasionally be able to see it is a nice thing, you know? Milad, oh, and I'm just about to close the episode late again, but that's all right. Um, we'll catch up next week and we'll talk about things. Next week, we're going to do an episode and we're going to talk about modding and tools for modding and modding things and who's modding. Um, I'll lean in a little, and I'll genuflect in the direction of people who are doing things like engraving, but mostly I'll do the due diligence for you all and talk about next week modding and modding tools, and for the straight up stuff, cases, faces, crowns, bracelets. Well, bracelet swaps are easy. Anybody can do that. You can mod. Everyone is a modder. Every watch collector is a modder if you consider swapping bracelets a mod. And depending on the watch, it makes a big difference. I mean, it really does make a big difference. For example, the this watch came with a brown strap, right? But what happens if you don't like brown? So I put a blue alligator on it, which fits it better to me. You could say that's a mod, right? Or the well, let's not go too deeply into the strap area because I talked about that in the past. But yeah, you can go once you start thinking about changing how that watch looks. You've entered a whole new world of playing with your toys, as it were. Good evening, Antares. How's it going? Oh, Derek got here too. Your nap ran long. Oh, well, we'll run a few more minutes for you guys and gals out there, just in case. Don't want to leave anybody in the lurch. Jonathan Robinson, how's it going? What do you think about the solid gold Speedmaster? I think if you can afford it, it's cool. There are people who like gold. Me personally, I'm a silvery metals man. Steel, white, gold, silver. Matter of fact, I mix them all: white, gold, steel. I've got both. Well, these are both silver, but the nice thing about white, gold, and silver is and steel is they don't clash. So, but then that argument also goes for people who like gold. You can buy all of these things in yellow gold, and there are people who want their yellow gold to coordinate. And the Speedmaster is a great watch. So if you can afford a solid gold Speedmaster, more power to you because it's a beautiful piece. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know what the current gold Speedy looks like. I mean, I've probably seen pictures I forgot, but the old one had a red bezel, which really looked sharp. Because that's the other nice thing is, once you start playing with metals, you can play with some of the look of the piece as well. I guess the type of metal could be considered almost an accessory because you could have the same watch in a steel case and in a white gold case and in a platinum case. And it's the same watch, but obviously the perception and the levels of quality of perceived quality are different because precious metals, they call them precious for a reason. But yeah, metals are, what the watch is made of is an important thing, I think, as well. Obviously, uh, you want a steel watch, you don't want a brass watch. Bronze is becoming popular, but bronze, interestingly enough, bronze and brass are pretty much the same metal in a way. They're both alloys of either tin and copper or uh, arsenic and copper and tin. And it's interesting that a brass watch is considered cheap, and even today, if you see a watch and it says base metal written on it, they mean it's got brass in it. Um, so what the watch is made of, is an important aspect as well. But I guess it's on the edge of calling it an accessory. But if you're modding, it is right because then you're swapping. You can literally swap what the watch is made of. Let's see. Mark, great show. Thanks to everyone. Can't wait for the mod show. Good night from Cyprus. Good night. You take care now, Mark. And we are at the top of the hour, but if any of the newcomers had anything that they wanted to say before we rolled out, I, of course, would address it otherwise. Oh, my OCD won't allow me to have Jonathan Robbins says, my OCD won't allow me to have a bronze watch. Um, Oh, and Hannes says, yes, good night from Wiesbaden. I'm in Wiesbaden too. I bumped into Hannes a couple of weeks ago. Good guy. I'll buy you a beer next time I see you, Hannes. And Jonathan can't allow you to wear a bronze watch. Well, because bronze watches, a lot of people maintain the cases, they'll scrub them with lemon juice or something and, play with the patina. But then again, that's the nice thing about bronze. It has a patina and it is something that you can play with. So, why not? If it's there and it doesn't damage the watch and you can have fun with it, have fun with the watch, which is what I was saying before about those cartoon character watches. Have fun if you can afford to have a whimsical watch, have a whimsical watch. But those cartoon watches aren't trying to get new kids from outside the space. Nobody's spending $4,000 on a Mario Kart Chrono who isn't already a watch collector. You know, and but things like bronze, I can see bronze. I've seen bronze watches bring people in. They're like, "Oh, that's cool," and they used to have watches, and they decided to get a watch because it was bronze, and had fun with it. So yeah, you never know what strikes people's fancies, but then that's one of the beautiful things about watch collecting. There are so many different kinds of watches. So we have reached, well, we're a little bit past the top, but like I said, I wanted to give a little bit of chance in case any of our latecomers had anything they wanted to bring up. Uh, Quick before we go, live stream from the pub. You know what? If Scotch had a better wireless connection, I would stream from there because I would love to stream, do the old school stream with a crowd of people and have some crowd answers and questions as well. And who knows, one day they might increase the quality of the Wi-Fi there. If I can find a local pub that does have good Wi-Fi, I might do a live episode with a bunch of people around. That would be cool as heck. That is a great idea, and, I've done interviews from within like I've done a couple of the episodes with Rob where we talk about some of his, collection. We've done that from inside the pub, but, live stream, yeah, we need a better wireless. We need a fatter bandwidth connection first. Yeah, meeting at the Scotch. So, everybody take care, live long and prosper, and we'll talk next week. During the week, I will release the review of this piece. I haven't shot it yet, but I plan to either Tuesday or Wednesday. So keep an eye out for it. Tell your friends to subscribe, and you know, take care of yourselves. And I love you all. Until next week.